Okay, I'm Erhard Kraus here, and I'm a paddler like all of you. And we heard Andy's talk, who was a resident. He lives in Toronto now, but he still goes up there regularly. And I met him as a paddler and in the activity that I'll be describing here right now. Why am I telling you all this? I mean, it's just another canoe trip, you could think. But I had a little bit a different way of approaching it and than many of you have, and maybe I can convince you to do the same. Okay. So, so as I mentioned, I'm not particularly good, even though I'd love to be. I can't go very far because the further north you go, you have to pay extra money because it's a drive, it's maybe an airplane ticket, maybe a fly-in, and so on. And from this point of view, I decided early on that I couldn't do that, and I had to look at other ways on how to get to the thing I love most, which is really nature, to be out there with it. And I did find a way on how to do that. So by the early 90s, I had paddled much of it south of the French River. Let me just here operate this. Oh, there we go. The French is in this area. I had paddled just about everything down here. I had been in some places up there. And the question is now, where do you go? And it's not going to break the bank, right? Well, I decided on an area that's close by, and that is the Spanish River. And so let me outline it. You got the city of Sudbury. All right. The river itself starts up here. See, there's a highway going up from Sudbury 144, starts on Duke Lake, and there's the east branch of the river. There's a west branch starting over in Bisco. Well, it comes actually from further up. Okay, and goes down here. There's a place called the Forks. It's obvious why. Lake Pogomising is down here. That's what Andy talked about. This park here did not exist when I started out, and I'll get back to that later a little bit. But the river continues down here. Usually that's a takeout spot where most people take out. They do the full river. Okay, there are other places along the river where you can get off, and then the river goes down and eventually ends up somewhere down here in Georgian Bay, maybe a little bit further over. Okay, so I said it's not a bad place, and I've known a little bit about it from reading Gray Owl books. He's quite ecstatic about the area, so it can be bad. And an office mate of mine had paddled here. I show this particular slide just to see here that the whole area is covered with lakes, forests, and rocks, so the sort of thing that we are after, right? Somebody's lost over there? Okay, all right. Okay, so this office mate, John Yip, okay, had this picture on his desk about a river somewhere up north with a railway beside it and some smiling people that had a good time. Okay, and then another picture from John's desk. This one here, he didn't even remember until I asked him about those pictures. And by the way, there are a few pictures that I've borrowed from other people, including from Andy, from John, and some friends as well. Okay. So I was hooked on that one. It was a good river. There was a book out there that is still available on the internet. I think it's out of print, which is pretty good. Ron Reed, Janet Grant. Excellent book because it brings nature in as well as the trip itself in a very competent way. Both of them are well-known naturalists. Okay. By the time I made the decision firmly I had paddled it already twice. It's a nice river. Excellent natural setting, okay. And I wrote in my own notes, I said, it's like a symphony. It starts out, when you go on the East Branch, it starts out with a chain of lakes, more than 10 lakes. And the lakes are connected by a trickle in the beginning. And as you go further down, there's more and more water. And it becomes really enjoyable just as you warm up for it. The water gets a little bit more challenging, and eventually it ends up with real rapids, graveyard rapids, or some that even that are must portages. Okay, further down there's a place called the Royal Ride, which is class 1 and 2s, and continues for not quite a day. So it's a real treat. It's a wonderful river to paddle. So I decided on this river to do this. Now, Poggamissing was mentioned in the previous presentation, and that really started what my approach was, to just go and don't stay on the main river, but go and take a look and see what's up there, what's around the corner. Okay, in this case, this is the river down here. This is out of Reed and Grant's book. It showed a portage up here, and there's the name of the lake here, Poggamissing. By the way, it's not the only portage. This is the one that Andy talks about, and that the duck actually has this military vehicle that's been taken. There's another one up here with where the lake drains. Well, oops, sorry, what happened here? Okay, there is another portage up there, and you'll see that later. There is also down here, Ron Reed mentions that the name is where the water flows over gravel. He got that name by talking to somebody who knows these things, but maybe something got lost in the translation. I've talked to Craig MacDonald about that, and he says, yeah, it means water flowing or being over gravel or over stones, but it does not refer to the river, okay? But it refers to the lake itself, and a shallow place in the lake. There's this, where the fishing was very good. So the Indian name indicated that once you get to that lake, Poggamissing, it's a good place to fish there. So look for it, and you can feed yourself. And later we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so that's when you paddle down the Spanish River. That's what you see. This is the shore, obviously. There's a river coming in, and the railway goes right over it. Okay, so as usually as we do in interesting places, we get out, discover that blueberries are good, so you pick them. Also some nice pin cherries and so on. And I had done several trips. On one of those, I had met a native guy camping there. Well, really, he was underneath the right post of the bridge. He didn't even have a sleeping bag out there. He was cooking his meal. He didn't have a tent, nothing. He just was in nature, found a safe spot, and I thought that was pretty good. So, obviously they camp differently than we do, but he probably had just as much fun as I had. What we did then is, the portage goes up there, so we scouted that. And it was quite interesting. So if I show with this map, it doesn't come out that well. Okay, this is the river. This is the bridge I've talked about. Okay, this is Poggamissing River. It's more a creek. Had a sluice in there from the logging operations. And this here is Pog Lake. Okay, so in 1994, went with my wife. We went up there, and we really had a time of our lives. It was fantastic. After going up there, and that was a little more difficult because of a rock face that when you scout it, you go without any gears, no problem walking up this thing. But when you're walking up there with a heavy pack or the canoe on, and you have to turn around while you're going up this thing, it was a little bit awkward. Then we camped, I think the first night we camped, I think it was out there on this point here. Didn't like it too much, it's kind of flat and so on, not so exciting. But the next night we found a wonderful little campsite down there, and so we spent a few nights out there and started to love the lake. It's a big lake, it's clear. Okay, there is some rivers coming in, that's the Pog Creek or Pog River comes from this way, and then it drains out there. Some Indian graves in there, okay, down here, which is really neat. I'd never seen that before. Just you go up on the shore, a little bit of gravel, and some nice pines there. And there was a tiny little fence, about the size, the length of a man. And you could see some disturbance further back. There were some more graves. So it was really great. It connects you with the past. So anyway, so we loved the lake. Okay, that is the waterfall as we walked up to that portage. Should have mentioned also the very large wasp's nest that was at the very top, where you go by it and sort of say, well, let's be friends. Okay. And that here was the look from the campsite out Park Lake. You see, there's a little hump on the horizon. There is this big expanse of water. When the wind is up, of course, you get waves. It's a very fine gravel where it's pleasant to walk on, and we had absolute privacy. That was great. So we got back home, and John Yip, the office mate, he said, well, you guys, you've been up here in Park Lake. This here is the river as it flows down there. There got to be a way to get down through this lake here and those lakes. And down here the map shows a river draining back into the lake. So he said there got to be the possibility to do a side trip there. And that, of course, means adventure. Okay, so I discussed it with my paddling partner of those days. This is Ed. He's sitting over there. Okay, recording it right now. Okay, so we decided to check it out. So I first went with my wife. We had done the earlier portions. We had up here in Park. We had stayed there. And then the intent was to go down here. Okay, and just in summary, okay, we made that successfully until we got here. And there we couldn't find the portage. It was pretty rough. I was walking around, the river had current too, it wasn't easy, and the wife panicked. When the wife panics, it's serious. Okay, it doesn't matter whether it's a real issue or whether it's not, but we decided to turn back. Okay, so we had to backtrack, and the mission was not accomplished, but it wasn't all lost. It was actually very good. Okay, and that is when I say we started to get a connection with the area, and I'll expand a little bit. First of all, there's the Ward family. These were people that had, as a young couple, after they had both had participated in the war operations in Europe, they'd gotten a little bit of money at the end of the war, and they decided to go and settle on Park and establish a lodge. They were from Toronto, by the way, didn't have a clue what it was like and what you have to do, but they were successful anyways. This is Kay. Kay Ward is still alive. She is in her mid-90s. Okay. Harry, okay, we met him still. He died a few years back. And a wonderful couple. Okay, we experienced northern hospitality through them. The way how this worked out is we were on the lake. We had stayed at our favorite campsite, and the next day we tried to figure out how do we get into that next chain of lakes. We didn't even know whether it was possible. So what you do is you talk to the locals. We paddled down to the near the landing. There are a few cabins there, cottages, if we call them. That's what we call them in the south. And we saw one cabin had motorboat out front. Flag was up, so we decided to go up, knock at the door. Door opened, and we were immediately welcomed. They asked what we needed, what we wanted. Said, come on in, have some coffee. There was some fresh baked stuff. Kay is an excellent baker, by the way. And so they helped us out. We stayed in touch. We kept exchanging mail. We visited a few times more. It's just great. To me, it's one aspect of the Canadian North. It's just the hospitality, the willingness to help, that don't ask any questions, nothing that might be intrusive, but you get help. People are open. And it was a wonderful opening for myself. Okay. By the way, Kay wrote a book, and this here is the front of the book. It's less than 200 pages. It's great. it's about the people, about their own life, how they made it happen. It has a lot of insights in human life. So isn't that a great lake where you have two people writing books that are really worth reading? So anyways, but one of the things for our quest was really important, and that was they pointed the way to the Mogul. Okay, now if we all go with our head like this, that map will be familiar. Okay, you find there's the railway, and the river is right beside it, the Spanish River. By the way, this map is the one that they handed to their guests and said, this is the area, wherever you go, and this is where, the lakes are. This is where the creeks are. Right? Our little campsite would have been here. The lodge itself is down there. That is their portage over to the river, which is much easier, which I've started to take in later years. And they pointed the way and says, well, look, you can go down where you want to go to meet the river somewhere down there. You can't go there. You just follow the lake down here, and there's two portages, okay, which is fine. First of all, there's two portages. We have a choice, right? But it turns out that this portage here nobody uses, and I think it was used in times when the water level was low of Pog Lake here, because it has a dam, right? So the water might be drawn down. This bay gets awfully shallow. Well, whenever I've been there, there was always enough, and we could take this one then later, that portage. This is a wonderful lake here. It's narrow, it's absolutely clear water. I should mention this about Pog. This is clear. This is super clear. Okay. A wonderful rock face along here. Down here is an old dam that's pretty much in disrepair, so you just lift over, and then you can go down here, the Blue Water Lake, and the name isn't just romantic. Oops, sorry, I keep pressing the wrong button. Okay, I slide off here. Okay, and the last bay in this lake has wonderfully blue water. Absolutely great. So it's a wonderful trip. I've talked a little bit earlier, I've talked to somebody who has done that trip then later as well, and they were just as enthusiastic about it as I have been. So, but this map, just a second here. All right. Okay, we'll get back to that map a little bit later. I've mentioned the Indian Grave. Okay, I've talked about the name of that lake. And then the other thing that got mentioned at that time was the Hudson's Bay Post. Now, it's funny that the people that lived on the lake didn't really know much about that. What do they, a Hudson's Bay Post, to us, this is a big thing. How can local people forget about that? It was more there like a rumor. Well, I eventually got to know Andy, and then I found out Andy was writing the book, and I kept pushing him in the back like he probably needed this, like a hole in the head. But I watched the book grow. Okay. I think the other aspect that the lake got to me was, or that brought to me, to my mind, to my world, was it got me a little bit closer to the First Nations folks. I mean, they were there earlier. Andy's got a good description on the historical perspective that has happened there. I've always been very much interested in it. I come out of Germany, we're a little bit nuts about Indian stuff, obviously from our boyhood days. But in practicality, as we now, as we canoe out there, and we are in the country where they come from, the First Nations folks, I really have to admire their ability to live off the land. I mean, we go up there and we are proud of what we are doing, and maybe we are good at it even. But those folks lived there year-round, okay, snow, and the shoulder seasons, which can be trickier than the other ones. Okay, they lived off the land, and at least in the original culture, they did not need an infrastructure to keep them alive. That says a lot about the culture. The other thing as canoeists, of course, it's the route system that they established. The best way to describe it is just like we have highways, like we have streets, and we have little connecting pieces. They imposed, no, that's the wrong word. They created an infrastructure on the land. Okay, the canoe routes are still there. There are a remainder of those. They were much bigger, and there is a guy that you may be familiar with, Craig MacDonald, who in the 70s, I believe, he established actually what that infrastructure looked like over in the Tomogamy area. And I'm sure quite a few of you have seen that map. This is a section of this big map, and this shows all the various routes that you have in this area. This is the northwest corner of the Tomogamy area. You have Ishpadina up here. Okay, and let me just see. This is about 2 kilometers here. That's a portage that still exists. Actually, by now it's a logging road, and quite a few of you may have taken that one here. So you have in here the various canoe routes that go through. You have options. You can go, canoe routes are the blue ones. The green ones are the winter ways, how they go. And because they're year-round, so they have to travel in winter as well. We have to appreciate that these routes are laid out so that you can get around with minimal effort. When you start trying to locate old portages, you get a feel for it, what is the least effort, and you discover that that's exactly where the portage is. If you don't find it, then you haven't been looking in the wrong spot, or maybe all traces are gone. I should mention that, it's not just a local system that was used in their own wintering family areas or in summer, but also for long-distance travel. And in this case, of course, this is part as well. Like this here would connect up over to the Hudson's Bay watershed. This down here is the Wanapitei River, and this actually, if you were going to follow it up, it goes to a Scotia Lake, which then connects over to the Spanish River area. Okay, so it's a wonderful infrastructure that the First Nation folks had, and I really got to admire that. Once you understand a little bit about the infrastructure and, things that they do, you want to get a good book that describes what their life would have been like. Okay, and I found this in Cole's book. Okay, a fellow there in the mid-1800s traveled on Lake Superior when the culture was still intact. And I think a lot of you have seen pictographs in the countryside, and they're very hard to understand, right? These are little pictures of something that quite often we can make things out. Very often we don't understand it. And what does the whole thing mean? Well, in Cole's book, he goes into the parallel thing that existed in their culture, and these were the birch bark scrolls. Okay, and you find out that this really these are picture sequences as well of symbols, just like we find them in the pictographs, and it's one way to understand how they really were meant to be read. An excellent book on this one here, and thanks to George. All these books are available, and they weren't part of my world before I attended symposium. So Grace Rajnovich's book does a very good description on those. Not only that, they even give you locations of pictographs, and that is not easy to get because First Nation folks and a lot of other folks are quite protective of these things. And one of them is on Scotia Lake, okay, and we are back to the Spanish now, the Spanish area, okay. This is in the northeast corner of the map that I've shown earlier. There is Lake Onaping, here's Highway 144, the one that goes north-south, okay, and Onaping is a big lake, and there is another lake is over here, it's a very long and narrow one called Scotia Lake. Well, Grace Rajnovich's book said there were pictographs on it. I was interacting with the MNR here, the ministry that looks after forests in Ontario, and they wouldn't tell me where those things were. Of course, they know where they are, and they are tied by agreement not to, and that's okay. So I knew they were there, okay, and so I did 2 canoe trips. The first one here with some friends, we went up there and got into Scotia Lakes here. And then I like to explore more, so give me options. I did another trip later where we went up this big lake, which you don't like so much very much. It gets windy, it gets tricky. Go up there and come around. There's a very long, narrow bay that goes there, and we found the connection here. So this is all intact. So we knew there were pictographs, and the book itself, it shows what they look like. Okay, so there's a bunch of animals here, some symbols there, and she explains what they are for, and you can look it up yourself. I don't want to get into it. But here is a person, obviously, and that person has a head, and that head radiates something. Okay, so it's a special one, and that's why Grace put it in her book. So we were going to find this particular pictograph, and we did find it. It's on a flat rock that's sheltered, obviously. Okay, and I think this here is it. And let's just go and take a look. I'm not 100% sure now, but yeah, that's what it is. And that was really that was kind of neat to see this, not just in the book, printed, but you stand there, and this has been drawn up. Probably more than 100 years ago. I mean, it's a religious thing. A lot of the natives are Christians as well, so to do these things are not common for sure, even though they were at some point. It might have been also a few hundred years old. Okay. Now, just looking at a pictograph like this, we can never get the meaning of it, because according to the Cole's book earlier, there went with it a song, okay, or which basically called it a story, but it had to be repeated and it would be intoned, and it was a personal thing. A person would own that one. He might pass it on to somebody else or might not. So in this case, we don't know what it is, but it's just like me going to a Catholic church and admiring the wonderful things in there, and just respect them and be in awe. Okay, so back to the Spanish River, as I promised. Okay, the last thing I've talked about was the loop here, Onaping and Scotia Lake. Okay, I think I've expanded the map a little bit to pull the lines apart. This is the Temagami area where I've showed the earlier slide. Spanish River coming down here, and Park Lake being over here. What we tried to do is to get the bypass through here. Okay. You'll realize there are a few other routes around here. Maybe I should mention them right now. Okay, you've got here connections to the north, to the Hudson's Bay watershed. Okay, I'd always hoped I would do that connection once. I didn't. But there were other ones too. Another connection was up here. And then, of course, Temagami area has a whole bunch more. There is over the Mississauga River, okay, that goes down there. And you see there, they've done quite a number of trips in this area, even this little one here. If we have time, we'll get to that one here. And here's a really neat loop that actually we did is start in Bisco, come down here through Indian Lake. Oops, keep hitting this button. Okay, Indian Lake down here into Marjabong. Just a second, this is Marjabong, this is Indian Lake. Then cut across the countryside here through something called Little Park Lake, and then down here into Park, and then to Cunteed. So it's a wonderful place where to explore and paddle around. We've done some minor trips as well. For instance, down here, this one is Bannerman Creek. That is, it drains Lake Onaping, but it's a man-made connection, this one here. That shouldn't, and another one down here, Agnes River, tried to explore it going from the bottom up, but the other name is Sinaminde River. Sinaminde is this lake here, and according to Craig McDonald, it means the place with the stones. Now, lots of stones in this little creek, and as I walked up, I twisted an ankle, cracked it, and that was the end of this exploration trip. So, okay, what else did we find on this map? This is, again, is the map that the Park Lodge had provided. We find here some ways to go up north, and, oh, wait a second. This here is, okay, this is the one I've talked earlier about, is the one that will take us to the Mogo. Okay. This one down here shows you to get from Park is down here. You can go up Park River, Park Creek, and then continue from there, go over here, go and through Sinaminde, and then continue and see this magic word up here, Marjabong and Bisco, Bisco for biscuitasing. So that was a nice big route, an overland route, and we've done this a few times just for fun and with friends as well, of course. So now we had the route going over to Blue Water and over to the Mogo, but the map unfortunately stopped right there, and nobody knew whether that route was travelable now, but they said somebody had done it some decades before, so that was promising. So anyway, so we had the information that you can go this route. Okay. So we had tried I had tried with Peggy to go through here, and we were stopped there. So the following year, maybe it was 2 years later, I decided to go with Ed Finder. So the key thing was the bottom part, Blue Water Lake with that nice blue bay down here, following down the river. Okay, here is fairly open, kind of nice, very natural area, lots of birds as well. Going down here, there is the first portage. This is where I got stumped with Peggy. Just couldn't find it. So I tried to go along here with Ed, and we found it fairly quickly. Just a little bit rough. The entrance was hidden. And some big rock jumbles that you don't think this would be the start of a portage, but it was. And once we got down into the mess of little sticks and trees here alongside this, the river and the jumble of rocks, then we could even find old blazes. So we cleared it and continued. There was a wonderful little ledge down here. Go on, another set of waterfalls. Go down there, and then here would end. Okay, can still paddle. Eventually here the big portage is off to the right, a little bit away from the river. And we didn't know that, of course. So we went on. This is Ed. He hates that Warnigan. I tried it out. I had to try a Warnigan. So we traveled with this thing, and it's a wonderful box if we have more than 4 people. But for just 2 people, it's overkill. And after a while, Ed refused to carry it, so I carried it. Okay. So it's it's a natural thing. All right. This here is Andy's wife, and she paddles here along that huge rock face on Kennedy Lake. Thought it would come out a little bit lighter, but it doesn't. So that's all right. Okay. This is the last bay in Blue Water Lake, and it's just like a Killarney Lake. Wonderful. Ed won't drink the water, by the way. He thinks it's poisonous, and maybe he's right, maybe he isn't, but I camped there once, and I survived. This is one of the waterfalls down the Mogo River. Very pretty. Okay. There is a small campsite along a ledge there. Okay, it's a wonderful place to just soak in the bottom, let yourself splash with the water coming from the top. And the canoe rests in the meantime very peacefully here in the upstream section of this tiny lift over there. So it was really great. So we had this wonderful place, this Eden, as I perceived it. Okay, great, we'll come back, and so on. But we had noticed logging operations encroaching on Blue Water. Okay, so that's bad news. Knowing that logging is kind of destructive, brings roads in as well, it brings people in on motorized traffic. So what can we do to keep Eden intact? Okay. Well, it was a major effort that stretched over a number of years. In the process of that one here is I became the environmental rep for the Wilderness Canoe Association. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. Yep. Okay. And my role was to write a few articles to draw attention to environmental issues, and I've done that, and of course included the Spanish. And it works both ways. Whenever I walked into the MNR office, I could say I speak on behalf of an organization of 700 people, and so they listen a little bit harder. Okay. So now from the MNR's point of view, I mean, these are the people that control what's going on there. I was a stakeholder up there, and so are all the other paddlers. In order how to make these things happen is you have to participate in the forest management process. And the whole area is called the Spanish Forest. It's a chapeau for about 150 kilometers down to this corner about. This is the southwestern part of it. They had 18 canoe routes. by name, but they didn't have them on the map except for the Spanish. Okay, so which is really lousy, because the way how the process works is all the planning is done by computer. And if something isn't on there, then the planning process doesn't know about it, so they might bulldoze an area that is a perfect portage. So yeah, the trick was to get these 18 canoe routes into their database. Okay. In order to get that done, we connected with other stakeholders in the area. There's all kinds of interesting people. You heard about some of them, and I have a few more. And then they were in the process of putting the new park in, the one that you've seen on the map. Now, I don't think I'm the reason they put the park in. I came much too late in the game, but I was really tickled pink when, after the park was established, the people that made it happen, including Ron Reed and Rick Sims, they had used my documentation of that trip and done that side trip, which leading just about all through the park. And later they sent me a thank you note, and that was really great. I did a lot of driving in this effort to participate and to give something back, but I think it's been worthwhile. Okay, how much time do we have?
1 or 2 minutes.
1 or 2 minutes? Okay, we'll use it. All right. Just the way how you work with the MNR, maybe I'll go through a quick example. I had from Craig McDonald, I had gotten a 1947 lands and forest map of the whole area. And there were portages on it. And you see, this here you don't recognize immediately, but here's Marjabong Lake. Here's Indian Lake. Here what the Pog Lake would be about here. And we realized that over here's Mississauga, and this is Bark Lake. There were a bunch of, see these little P's? Portages through here. Okay. So Ed and I decided to see whether we could establish an east-west connection through this area. To sum it up, no, we were not successful. But what we did is, there's a logging road going in here, by the way, that we could use. We tracked down the portages along here. We established to our satisfaction there wasn't a worthwhile canoe route for our purposes. It was too tough to get over the hills. And then there was easy to go around down here into these lakes. So we did explore, okay. We presented it to the MNR, okay, we invited them. And the MNR has a connection with the community, which is called the Local Citizens Local Citizens Committee, okay? So we presented to the LCC and then invited MNR folks to come and to join us on the paddle there, which is really get those guys out of the office. They love it, okay? They want an excuse. If you have a chance, take them out, do so, okay? And that was the area that we then documented, and we got, this is the portages we had seen. This is the logging road, so you can get to it. It's open to the public. Okay, and then this is the other one down here. So we got through, and we had some thoughts on how this at some point actually might have gotten flooded. So we got this thing, we got the MNR folks out there, and we also build relationships. Okay, one of them is Bob Martindale. He died a few years ago, but he was head of the Local Citizens Committee, and I think he pulled a few, he made a few moves in order to get me there in front of those folks and get this thing recognized, especially get the significance of the canoe routes recognized. They are values that must be respected. Okay, all right. So we documented, I documented these via web pages. Okay, if you want to find out more, you're all familiar with Google. Look for Erhard Canoe Spanish. That will get you most of the routes up. We used the CCR, Canadian Canoe Routes Forum, to tie people in, and I used email and correspondence. And altogether, we really, aside from all the good things that are obvious, we had a lot of fun, and we gave back. This is Andy, this is Ed, this is myself, and this was one of Andy's friends who came along. Had a great time, one of those other trips. So that's my talk, and I hope maybe you can do something similar. Okay, thank you.